My wife emptied our joint account overnight. $250,000 vanished while I slept. And I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I didn't call her. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt calm. That's the part that scares people when I tell this story. And that's why I'm telling it to you. Because if you're still watching, it means you're wondering the same thing everyone else does. Why didn't he react like a normal person? Why wasn't I angry? Why wasn't I afraid? Give me a few minutes, and I promise this will make sense. Not in a revenge kind of way, but in a human one. It was a Tuesday morning. Early. Still dark enough that the room hadn't decided whether it wanted to be night or day. I remember that detail because I checked the time twice, thinking my phone screen was playing tricks on me. 5:41 a.m. My alarm hadn't gone off yet. I woke up for no reason I could explain. No bad dream. No noise. Just that quiet internal nudge that says, open your eyes. I reached for my phone out of habit. I always did that before work. Scroll the news, check messages, maybe glance at our account balance if a bill was due. Nothing obsessive. Just responsible. The notification was already there. Transfer complete. At first, my brain refused to translate the words. It treated them like a foreign language, recognizable letters, no meaning attached. I tapped the banking app. Fingerprint. Loading wheel. Then the number appeared. $0. I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because I didn't understand math, but because my mind was still protecting me from the reality behind it. I refreshed the screen. Still zero. That's when I noticed the transaction history. One line item. One destination. Her personal account. The one we both agreed was just for her freelance side work. The one she promised she'd never mix with our money. $250,000. Transferred at 2:17 a.m. 4 hours earlier. Now here's the part people expect me to dramatize. The racing heart. The shaking hands. The shouting her name. None of that happened. What I felt instead was something colder. Cleaner. Like a switch flipping. I remember sitting up slowly, placing my feet flat on the floor, and thinking one very clear thought. Okay, so this is real. Not why would she do this? Not how could she betray me? Just this happened. I looked over at her side of the bed. Empty. Sheets cold. She hadn't slept there at all. Still, I didn't call her. I didn't text. I didn't even sigh. And before you judge that reaction, or lack of one, let me ask you to stay with me. Because this story isn't about money disappearing. It's about something far more dangerous quietly revealing itself. I stood up, walked into the kitchen, and poured a glass of water. I remember the sound of the fridge humming. The way the floor felt colder than usual. The normality of it all felt almost insulting. My life had just detonated financially, and the world didn't care. I leaned against the counter and finally let the weight settle in, not emotionally, but intellectually. Like reading a medical diagnosis before the pain arrives. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This was intentional. And intent changes everything. I thought about calling her then, just to hear her voice. Just to confirm it wasn't some elaborate misunderstanding. But something inside me, something quiet and steady, said no. Not yet. Because if she took everything without a word, then the next move mattered more than the first reaction. That's when I made the call. One phone call. Not to her. Not to the bank. A call that would change the next few hours and the rest of my life. But to understand why that call mattered. Why I didn't panic. Why calm was the only weapon I trusted in that moment. You need to know who I was before that Tuesday morning. And who I believed she was. So let me take you back, just a little, to the life I thought was unbreakable. Before that morning, my life felt settled. Not flashy. Not perfect. Just solid. I was 28 years old, married for 3 years, together for 6. We lived in a quiet apartment on the edge of the city, close enough to work, far enough from noise. Mornings were predictable. Coffee first. Shower second. We'd cross paths in the hallway, exchange a half smile, maybe a quick kiss if we weren't running late. That rhythm mattered to me. I grew up without much stability, so when I finally had it, I protected it fiercely. I worked in financial consulting, long hours, clean spreadsheets, controlled outcomes. I liked knowing where things stood. Numbers didn't lie. Plans could be tested. Futures could be modeled. My wife, Emily, was the opposite in the best ways. Creative. Warm. Intuitive. She freelanced as a brand designer, working odd hours, sometimes late into the night when inspiration hit. I admired that about her. I told myself we balanced each other. and I believed we trusted each other completely. Money, especially, was something we were aligned on. Early in our relationship, we talked through everything: savings goals, retirement, emergencies. We opened a joint account after we got married, agreed that big decisions came with conversations, not surprises. That account wasn't just money to me. It was proof. Proof that we were building something together. That we were adults. Partners. Every month, I transferred most of my paycheck into it. Bonuses too. We joked that it was our future fund. House someday. Kids maybe. Freedom definitely. Looking back now, I realize how comforting that belief was. How much weight I put on the idea that if the account was growing, so were we. Emotionally, I was content. Not euphoric. Just steady. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. And when people asked me how married life was, I'd say, easy. I meant it as a compliment. Emily seemed happy too. She laughed easily. She talked about future trips. She sent me photos of design drafts and asked my opinion, even when I didn't fully understand what she was showing me. There were no screaming fights. No slammed doors. No obvious cracks. But stability has a strange side effect. It can dull your instincts. There were small things. At the time, they barely registered. Now they replay in my mind with uncomfortable clarity. She started keeping her phone face down. She began taking calls in the other room. She'd say things like, "I'm just tired," more often than before. Nothing dramatic. Nothing you'd confront someone over without sounding paranoid. One night, maybe 2 weeks before everything happened, I asked her a simple question while we were brushing our teeth. "Hey, did you ever move that invoice money into the joint account?" She paused. Just for a second. Foam still in her mouth. Then she nodded. "Yeah, I did. I'll show you later." She never did. And I never asked again. That's the part that still sits heavy with me. Not that she lied, but that I let the moment pass because pressing felt uncomfortable. Because I wanted peace more than clarity. I trusted the version of our life that existed in my head. We talked about buying a house that same week. Looked at listings online. Laughed about terrible kitchens. She rested her head on my shoulder and said, "We're doing okay, you know." I believed her. Now let me ask you something before I go further. Have you ever had that gut feeling that something was off, but you ignored it because you didn't want to believe it? Tell me in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. Because I think most betrayals don't arrive with alarms. They arrive quietly, wrapped in routine. The night before that Tuesday, Emily said she was staying up late to finish a project. I kissed her good night around 11. She smiled, told me to sleep well. I didn't hear her come to bed. I didn't hear her leave. And when I woke up hours later to that notification, it wasn't just the money that was gone. It was the certainty I'd been living inside. At that point, I still didn't know why. I didn't know how deep it went. But something fundamental had shifted. Like a floorboard creaking beneath your foot, warning you that the house isn't as strong as you thought. And that was only the beginning. Because the next signs wouldn't be subtle at all. After that morning, I didn't confront her. That decision wasn't heroic. It wasn't strategic genius. It was instinct, quiet, deliberate instinct telling me that if I reacted emotionally, I'd lose access to the truth. So I went to work. I showered. I dressed. I made coffee. Every movement felt surreal, like I was watching myself from a few feet away. The world looked exactly the same, which made what I knew feel unreal. On the drive to the office, I replayed the transaction details in my head. Time. Amount. Destination. I wasn't angry yet. Anger needs a story. All I had were facts. At my desk, I pulled up our shared calendar. No notes. No reminders. Nothing unusual. Emily hadn't messaged me. No apology. No explanation. That silence was the first real clue. By mid-morning, I logged into our financial dashboard, the one I'd built to track everything. Investments. Savings. Cash flow. It felt strange seeing the joint account sit empty while the rest of the numbers stayed intact. Like a missing tooth you can't stop noticing. Then I saw it. A withdrawal from our emergency fund 3 weeks earlier. Smaller. Easy to miss. I'd written it off as a software glitch at the time. I told myself I'd reconcile it later. Later had arrived. I checked the destination account. Same one. That's when unease turned into suspicion. This wasn't impulsive. This was practiced. I started looking backward, carefully, methodically. Small transfers. Spaced out. Always late at night. Always just under amounts that would trigger alerts. She hadn't taken everything all at once. She'd tested the door first. And it opened. My hands stayed steady on the mouse, but my chest tightened. Not panic, focus. A different kind of fear. The kind that sharpens instead of blurs. At lunch, I called her. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. Neutral. Almost boring. Hey, just wanted to check in. Call me when you get a chance. No accusation. No edge. An hour passed. Then 2. Around 3 in the afternoon, she finally texted. Busy day. Everything okay? That question did something to me. Everything okay? She knew exactly what she'd done. And she asked anyway. I typed a response, deleted it, typed again. Yeah. Just wanted to talk. She read it. No reply. That was the second real clue. The third came when I remembered something I'd almost forgotten. 2 months earlier, Emily had asked about moving some assets around. Casual. Over dinner. Hypothetically, she'd said, how fast could someone move money if they needed to? I'd answered honestly. Same-day transfers. No holds between internal accounts. I even joked, why, planning a secret escape? She laughed. So did I. Now that laugh echoed differently. That afternoon, I didn't get much work done. Instead, I watched patterns emerge. Not just in the numbers, but in her behavior over the past year. The late nights. The privacy. The gradual separation disguised as independence. I realized something uncomfortable. She hadn't changed suddenly. I just stopped looking closely. When I got home that evening, the apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Her shoes were gone. Closet lighter than it should have been. Not emptied. Curated. That's when my phone buzzed again. We need to talk. I'll explain later. Later. A word people use when they want control over the timing of consequences. I sat on the couch and stared at the wall. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I felt something worse, clarity without comfort. She wasn't panicking, which meant she thought she was ahead. Pause for a second. What would you have done in my position? Would you have confronted her right then, or waited and watched? Drop your answer below. I really want to know. Because that question, act or observe, defines everything that comes next. I chose to wait. And that choice would reveal more than she ever intended to show. Waiting is harder than reacting. Reaction burns fast and clean. Waiting lets thoughts rot if you're not careful. That night, I didn't sleep. Emily still didn't come home. No message. No update. Just absence. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, replaying years of conversations and scanning them for hidden meanings. Every memory felt suddenly unreliable, like evidence contaminated after the fact. Around 2 a.m., I got up and opened my laptop. I wasn't looking for drama. I was looking for confirmation. The first thing I checked was our shared cloud storage. Nothing obvious. Then email, filters, archived folders, anything that didn't belong. Still nothing. Emily was careful. Or maybe she just never thought I'd look. Then I remembered something small. A detail so minor I dismissed it at the time. She'd asked me months earlier to stop using my laptop for joint documents because hers organized things better. I'd agreed without thinking. I logged into her laptop. It took one try to guess the password. That realization alone hurt more than I expected. Birthdays. Patterns. Familiarity used against me. There it was. A folder labeled personal. Inside, screenshots. Bank confirmations. A spreadsheet. I opened the spreadsheet first. Dates. Amounts. Notes. Not emotional notes. Strategic ones. Test transfer, no alert. Safe threshold. Final move window. I felt my throat tighten. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't fear-driven. This was planned. I scrolled further. Another document. A draft email. Unsent. I've secured the funds. I'll be able to move once the paperwork is finalized. Paperwork. That word landed hard. I searched it and found messages with a lawyer. Divorce attorney. Initial consultation. Asset division questions. Jurisdiction details. Dated 6 weeks earlier. 6 weeks. That meant while we were planning vacations. While she rested her head on my shoulder. While she asked me if we were doing okay. She was preparing to leave. I sat there in the dark, laptop glow reflecting off the walls, and felt the slow collapse of something I didn't realize I'd built my entire sense of safety on. It wasn't just that she took the money. It was that she let me keep believing. That's when the emotional weight finally hit. Not as chaos, but as pressure. Like standing underwater too long. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms into my eyes. For a moment, I thought I might throw up. Instead, I laughed once. quiet, disbelieving. I need you to understand. This wasn't just betrayal. This was my whole life collapsing. Have you ever been blindsided like this? If you've been there, share your story below. We heal better together. Around 4 a.m., my phone buzzed. Emily, I'm staying with a friend. We'll talk tomorrow. No apology. No explanation. Just management. That was the lowest point, not the discovery itself, but the realization that the woman I married had already moved on emotionally, and I was the last one to find out. I finally cried then. Not loudly. Just enough to release the pressure. Tears don't mean weakness. Sometimes they're just a system reset. When the sun came up, I felt hollow. Stripped down to essentials. Fear was there, but underneath it was something steadier. Resolve. Because now I knew the full shape of the truth. And truth, once complete, becomes leverage. By the time morning arrived, I wasn't asking why anymore. I was asking what now. And the answer wouldn't come from emotion. It would come from action. There's a moment after something breaks where you can either stare at the damage or start deciding what still works. I chose the second. By mid-morning, my emotions had gone quiet, not gone, just contained. Like I'd sealed them behind glass. I knew they'd come back later. But right then, they weren't useful. I took the day off work. Not to rest, to think. I made a list. Literal pen and paper. What I knew. What I could prove. What I needed. Facts first. Always facts. I knew the exact amounts transferred. I had timestamps. I had her spreadsheet. I had emails with her attorney. Most people don't realize this, but preparation leaves fingerprints. And Emily had left more than she realized. Next, I asked myself the hardest question of the day. What do I actually want? Not emotionally. Practically. Did I want revenge? No. Revenge is loud and messy. It feels good briefly, then leaves you with more cleanup. Did I want to reconcile? That answer came fast and clear, no. Trust, once weaponized, doesn't come back. What I wanted was control. Not over her, but over the outcome. I didn't want to be reactive. I didn't want to be framed as the angry husband scrambling after the fact. I wanted to move from a position of calm authority. So I made the call I'd avoided the day before. Not to Emily. To a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. One I'd worked with professionally through a client. Someone who specialized in asset protection and high-conflict separations. I trusted him because he didn't posture. He listened. I laid everything out. Slowly. Clearly. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was a pause on the line. Then he said something I'll never forget. You're early. That's good. Early. That single word shifted the power dynamic back into my hands. He explained my options, not emotionally but structurally. Emergency injunctions. Asset tracing. Intent to conceal marital funds. The fact that her premeditation worked against her, not for her. Most importantly, he said this. Do nothing publicly. Do nothing emotionally. Let me handle the next steps. That advice felt right, like setting a bone back into place. After the call, I sat quietly for a long time. I let myself feel the grief, not dramatically, just honestly. I mourned the version of my life I thought I was living, the future I'd planned in good faith. Then I put those feelings aside, because clarity had replaced confusion. Emily thought she'd made a clean break. She thought she'd gotten ahead of the story. She hadn't considered that calm people see further than angry ones. That afternoon, she texted again. Can we talk tonight? I stared at the message for a full minute before replying. Sure. One word. Neutral. No leverage given. Behind the scenes, things were already moving. Paperwork drafted. Banks flagged. Timelines mapped. She didn't know it yet, but the board had changed. What surprised me most was how steady I felt. Not numb. Not cold. Just aligned. For the first time since that Tuesday morning, I wasn't reacting to her choices. I was making my own. That night, as I waited for her to come back to the apartment, I asked myself one more question. The kind that splits people into different versions of themselves. Was I doing this to punish her? Or to protect myself? The answer mattered. And it still does. Here's where I made my choice. Do you believe in revenge or in walking away? When someone destroys your trust, what's the right move? Comment below. I want both sides. Because what happened next wasn't loud. But it was decisive. And once it started, there was no undoing it. Emily walked in at 7:12 p.m. I remember the time because I checked my watch without thinking. One last habit from a life that was already ending. She looked composed. Hair neat. shoulders back. Someone who believed they were about to control the narrative. We sat at opposite ends of the table. She started talking immediately. I didn't want to do it like this, she said. But I didn't feel safe anymore. I let her finish. She talked about feeling distant, about needing space, about how the money was temporary, about how she planned to sort it out later. I didn't interrupt once. When she paused, I spoke. The funds are frozen. Her eyes flicked up. Just for a second. What? The transfers you made, I continued, calm and measured. They've been flagged. Reversed pending review. Silence. Her confidence cracked. Not fully, but enough. You can't do that, she said. I didn't, I replied. My attorney did. That word landed like weight. Attorney. Her posture changed. Defensive now. Calculating. I slid my phone across the table, not aggressively. Just enough. On the screen, a copy of her spreadsheet. Dates. Notes. Strategy. She didn't touch the phone. You planned this, I said. Not accusatory. Just factual. Which means this isn't about fear. It's about control. She tried to speak. I raised a hand. Let me finish. I explained the legal position. Briefly. Precisely. How intent mattered. How premeditation changed asset division. How her messages created a timeline she couldn't erase. Her face drained of color. This is the moment everything changed. Be honest. Are you rooting for me right now, or do you think I went too far? Tell me in the comments. I can take it. She asked if we could handle this privately. I shook my head. You already decided not to. That was it. No shouting. No threats. Just consequences arriving on schedule. She left shortly after. No slammed doors. Just quiet footsteps and a closing latch. By morning, the process was irreversible. And for the first time in days, I slept. The days after felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful. Quiet in the way a city feels after a storm has passed through. Things still standing, but rearranged. Some damage visible. Some hidden. Emily moved out completely within a week. Not dramatically. She came when I wasn't home and took what she'd already decided was hers. Clothes. Personal items. Books she liked more than I did. She didn't touch anything shared. At that point, she knew better. We didn't speak much after that night. Everything went through attorneys. Emails stripped of emotion. Language reduced to logistics. Dates. Amounts. Deadlines. That distance helped. The money came back in stages. Not all at once. Not without friction. But it returned to where it legally belonged. The account no longer meant what it once did, but seeing it refilled felt like regaining oxygen after being underwater too long. Still, I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. People assume that when the right outcome happens, relief rushes in. That justice feels like a rush of satisfaction. For me, it felt more like setting down something heavy I'd been carrying without realizing it. I went back to work after a few days. My colleagues didn't know. I kept it that way. I liked being treated like a normal person. Liked the structure. The quiet competence of routine. At night, the apartment felt bigger than before. Too much space. Too many echoes. I moved furniture. Changed small things. Not because I needed a new start, but because the old layout no longer fit who I was. I started cooking for myself again. Simple meals. Nothing ambitious. Just enough to feel grounded. I took longer walks. Left my phone at home sometimes. Let my thoughts catch up to me at their own pace. What surprised me most wasn't the sadness. It was how little anger I felt. Not because what she did was forgivable, but because anger requires ongoing investment. And I was done investing. Looking back now, I wonder if I'd do it the same way again. What about you? Was the pain necessary to become who you are today? Let me know below. I didn't come out of this harder or colder. I came out clearer. Clear about what trust actually looks like in action. Clear about the difference between love and convenience. Clear about the cost of ignoring small discomforts to preserve surface peace. Some things were lost permanently. The version of marriage I believed in. The illusion that stability means safety. But some things remained. My sense of self. My ability to stay calm under pressure. My belief that integrity matters, even when no one is watching. I didn't rush into anything new. Relationships or otherwise. I let silence teach me what noise never could. And slowly, without effort, I started to feel like myself again. Not the man I was before. A quieter version. A steadier one. Someone who understood that strength doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just endures. Time has a way of sanding down the sharpest edges. Months passed, then a year. The story stopped feeling raw and started feeling finished. Not forgotten, finished. Like a book you don't reread, but you understand differently every time you think about it. People still ask me if I forgave her. I usually pause before answering. Not because I'm unsure, but because forgiveness means different things to different people. I didn't forgive to make her feel better. I didn't forgive to restore anything. I forgave so I wouldn't carry her choices into rooms she no longer occupied. That's the part no one tells you. Forgiveness, when it's real, isn't soft. It's efficient. It clears space. What I learned through all of this is simple, but not easy. Trust isn't about believing someone won't hurt you. It's about knowing how you'll respond if they do. I trusted her completely, and that trust was misplaced. But I also trusted myself to remain steady when it mattered most. That trust held. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Pay attention to the small moments where your intuition speaks quietly. Discomfort isn't drama, it's information. And calm isn't weakness. It's preparation. So here's my final question. Is it better to forgive and move on, or to make sure they understand exactly what they lost? There's no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. Because every one of us will face a moment where something we believed in collapses. What defines us isn't how loudly we react, but how clearly we choose. So that's my story, folks. If it resonated with you, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far Matthew Carter's voice travels. Calm clarity, not chaos, is what turns betrayal into growth.